Okay, we are ready to go. We are in the book of Judges. We are going to finish the book of Judges tonight. Chapters 19, 20, and 21. You will see why when we do this tonight. We're not going to be able to read every verse because there's probably something, I haven't added them up, but there's probably something like 100 verses there. But I want to tell you, I've got it titled Sodom and Gomorrah. Repeats itself. This is Sodom and Gomorrah. We're in America. This is Sodom and Gomorrah. I do want to tell you that it's very dark. This story is X-rated, and it is in a bad condition. That's how far the nation of Israel had gone. It's ugly. There's nothing pretty about this at all the way through. And not only the sex and murder, civil war, just bad stuff. It just shows you the depravity of man. How bad can man get? There's a guy by the name of F.B. Meyer. Some of you might have heard of him, but he's written a lot of commentaries, and he recommended not reading it. What unfolds in this chapter 19, it is really, really ugly. We get desensitized, I think, a lot in the environment that we live in. But when you really think about it, it's awful. And he says this, it will be sufficient to ponder these words, which starts off with, it came about in those days when there was no king in Israel. Of course, sometimes then you see what? Everyone did what was right in their own eyes. Okay, when you ponder these words, it'll be sufficient, which occurs 4 times in the book here. Without reading further in this terrible chapter, which shows the depths of the depravity to which may sink apart from the grace of God. And so he's saying it's so bad that it's almost like he doesn't even really want to talk about some of these things that went on. You'll see sin after sin after sin. It's dark, it's deep. And so it's Sodom and Gomorrah. That's what we have. And of course, you're dealing with homosexuality and dealing with rape and all sorts of abuse, and it just goes on and on. And that's the condition where we are at. We are people who live in a nation and in a world that is deep in sin. Sometimes we don't know how bad it really is, but we're getting, I think, to see a lot of it being exposed that we never even knew that was going on, and we'll probably experience even more. It's just horrible. But remember, our King is Christ. We do have a deliverer. We have good news.
I was just thinking, his remnant is in here somewhere.
There is. Yep. And
they're not participating in all that.
Right, and how awful it must have been for them and
Yeah.
their families.
And we'll see a little bit of that remnant here, even though a lot of mistakes are made. It's really sin. They're not going by God's word a lot, most of the time, at all. But that's what we're into tonight, and so we will be closing out of this. And I don't know how to do it because there's no way we can read all the words. We'll try to get as much as we can, get some comments in. Starts off in chapter 19, your point 1. Each point is on each chapter. The first one is Gibeah's crime. You'll be wondering, what's Gibeah? What is that? And then when we get into chapter 20, it will be dealing with Israel's war with Benjamin, and that's a civil war, which we know that this nation has had that before. It could have it again. You never know. And then in chapter 21, the final chapter, is about the wives for the remnant of Benjamin. What's that about? Well, that's what we're going to be getting into. And so as we go into some darkness, we certainly need to get some light. Let's go into prayer with the Lord. Father, what a great God you are. And you shine light upon your truth, your word. And we see things clearly when your light is on. Lord, this is a dark world. Christ came into the world to penetrate the darkness, and that he did. And he brings salvation. And through your word, through your spirit, the salvation, it gives us meaning in life. We seek you and not sin. We desire to follow you. And may this section make us want to be more holy and stand out for you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Yeah,
Well,
my first question is, why would God put this in his word?
Part of the history that needs to be told.
He doesn't leave it, like set aside, I better not put that here.
Yeah.
He exposes man for what he is. If you don't see the depravity of man and of his chosen nation, if you don't see that here, you won't see it anywhere. It's very obvious. But, we live in an upside-down world. What is absolutely right and true is wrong. And whatever is absolutely wrong and sinful, it's right. Such goes man. Right. And we can identify with that where we live now. This is the culture. This is what we're looking at here in chapter 19, chapter 20, 21. This is us. We're in this. And you know what? It's gone through the history of mankind, the history of Israel, all throughout the time of the biblical times, all the way up through the time of church history and such. All this stuff has been going on. A lot of times it's under wraps, it's under cover. It's not as bad as it is in Numbers, but it's always been there. So here we go. Now it came about in those days when there was no king in Israel, that there was a certain Levite staying in the remote part of the hill country of Ephraim who took a concubine for himself from Bethlehem in Judah. Well, what we're going to take apart here is this. This is a Levite, which means he's a man of God, supposed to be representing. And we've already seen the story of another Levite, didn't we? That was out for hire. Whoever could give him more money and more popularity took that. So, here's another Levite. Does it take much to point out the sins here as we go through here, one by one? Almost every verse. He took for himself a concubine. Now, the Levite's concubine was recognized as a legal partner, only they were considered a little less than a wife. They are not considered to be in that kind of status in that society. A concubine really was a legal mistress. She's a mistress. That's what a concubine is. And a lot of prominent men in the Old Testament had concubines. One of them was Abraham. Yes, concubine. Jacob, concubine. Caleb had a concubine. Saul, David, Solomon, 300 concubines, something like 700 wives. Rehoboam. Significantly, we see this kind of thing going on throughout Scripture, and that's a family life God never blessed. You could see it, well, maybe it was intended for that time. No, it never was. Never. But Abraham, he's the father of what faith is, He's a father of Israelites. And that's right. In Genesis, right in the very beginning, God said that there will be one man, one woman, They come together as one. Didn't mention any other wives or other husbands. And yeah, of course, Jesus commented on it in Matthew 19, one flesh forever, those two. So, but it was a common thing back at that time, but it was never sanctioned by God. It's never good. Matter of fact, it never works out good. It never does. There's not one good thing you can see about it. It's interesting. Out of Abraham's loins came Isaac. That's the godly line. And then who was the other one? Ishmael. And you can trace his roots, go all the way to where we're at now. And of course, who comes from that? It's the Arab Muslim kind of people. But God still used that. God had a plan, though. But, you know, here's what happened. His concubine played the harlot.
Didn't see that coming.
The Levites?
Yeah.
Yep. And she went away, went to the father's house, her father's house, and she was there for 4 months. And then, real briefly, I'll tell you that the Levite wanted her back. Well, that seems pretty good. And he did go after her. He worked hard to bring that relationship back together. The thing is, the law at that time, whenever one was involved in an adulterous relationship, what did the law call for?
Okay.
Right. Death. Did that happen? No. It should have. You say, that just doesn't sound right, though. Well, that's how holy God is. That is a horrible thing, adultery is. But it was not done. We don't have that law today, but we know that that's what was put there for. So she should have been punished to death. She wasn't. So, concubine, and then there's adultery involved, and then the husband goes there to visit, and what happens is that the father wants him to stay for a day, feed him, take care of him, sit back and relax. They can talk. Did it another day. Did it another day. Did it another. He kept wanting to go and take his wife back with him, but the father just kept wanting them to stay. I think he was really hospitable. And so the father extended this, a longer visit than he expected. In 11 through 15 of chapter 1, he returns home, or he's returning home, and the Levite and the concubine, right? And they're going to spend the night. And they're over against Jerusalem, pretty close. Guess who lives there? It's the Jebusites. Jebusites are not Israelites. He doesn't trust them. They're pagans. I don't blame him. I don't think I'd feel too welcome there either. Let's move on. Let's go to a place where there are other Israelites, and we'll stay there, and we'll be safe. Well, that's not the case. Even though he didn't want to be in a pagan town that would be dangerous, he goes to Gibeah. There's no hospitality. Nobody really takes him in. The law says that they are to take people in and to be hospitable. This reflects poorly on the Gibeonites. Gibeah is the town that they're at the town square, which people would be able to see him and they'd take him in. Matter of fact, he's got all the goods that he needs. He has food. He has hay. He has the animals, and so he would be able to take care of himself. They just need a nice, safe place to stay. And so in 16 through 21, an Ephraimite. Now this Levite is from Ephraim. We learned that in the first verse, the hill country of Ephraim, which is north of there. This fellow countryman comes to visit him and offer him a place to stay while he is in Gibeah, which is an Israelite town. He's an Israelite, but he's an Ephraimite. So he offers them a place to stay at his place. from their own religion and own country and everything. So everything's going to be good, right?
You know what I find interesting is that he doesn't want to stay in the town of the pagans, but they themselves, the Israelites themselves, have become so paganistic.
There's no difference, is there?
It probably would have been safer if he had just stayed with one of the pagans. Probably wouldn't have been offered a home or shelter or anything like that, but, you know, perhaps the events that would have taken
But
place.
they do weird stuff in their homes.
Oh, okay.
You don't know what you might be getting into with one
Says
of
the
the pagans.
Levite marrying, trying to have a
Right.
a wife-ish thing.
Oh, but they're righteous.
But that's interesting, isn't it? Isn't it something that there it is, your own people, your own countrymen, and they're going to treat them probably maybe worse than the pagans would have.
Yeah.
I don't know. Might have been the same. But if they're the same, then they're just doing the same stuff. There's no difference. God's people should always be different than the pagans. So in verse 22, hey, we've advanced pretty far, haven't we? While they were celebrating, there they are at the house now, right? He takes them there, and they're celebrating. They're probably eating and drinking, or probably drinking some alcohol. It was usually involved because they're celebrating. Behold, the men of the city, certain, here we go, worthless fellows. We've seen that before. We don't like those worthless fellows, do we?
Proverbs says stay away.
You can tell them, that's right, stay away from worthless fellows.
Mine says perverted men.
That's what they are. They are absolutely perverted. Matter of fact, when we ran into this worthless fellow or perverted men before, your translation is probably staying consistent with what it said before, which is really what that means. And that's a good definition of it. So we'll read this part, even though F.B. Meyer recommended not reading it, but I have to think that he would never say, you shouldn't read certain parts of the Bible. But I think you get the idea of what he's saying, is that this is how evil this is, and it'll remind you of Sodom. They surrounded the house, pounding the door, and they spoke to the owner of the house, the old man who took the Levite in. Bring out the man who came into your house, that we may have relations with him. Evidently, they saw him in the town square. You know, people see that. They knew where he was at. That we may have relations with him. That is homosexual, isn't it? That's what they preferred. They probably did see the lady that was with them, but they prefer the men kind. But we'll see that they actually take whatever they can get, and it's not good. So the man, the owner of the house, okay, we see sin in there, right? Now that is not in the pagan town. This is where? This is it's Gibeah, the place, and it's from the tribe of Benjamin, which is where the first king, by the way, is going to come from. So, okay, the man, the owner of the house. So we see those men, simple. The man, the owner, nice guy, went out to them and said to them, no, my fellows, please do not act so wickedly. See, he recognized it's wicked. Since this man has come into my house, do not commit this act of folly. Well, I like that right there. And then the next verse. This is pathetic. What's that?
It says outrage instead of folly.
Okay. Do not commit this act of outrage. And that's what it is.
Folly sounds like something stupid. This is
Yeah.
stupid.
Mine says vile thing. They would do this vile.
I think we're getting up probably a little more.
Vile.
Yeah. Of course, their folly back then was it was even more than what just not being wise
Like
or
work
acting
felt-
stupid. It
what
was
felt
like that.
back
Yeah.
then.
Yeah.
So anyway, here is my virgin daughter. He says this bold thing, and he says, "Here's my virgin daughter." And his concubine. He didn't even ask. He said, "You take my daughter and take the concubine." At least that's something a little more normal. He is not standing up for what is right. He caves in, doesn't he? What's right in your own eyes, just as long as it's not us. You take them.
Take the women.
These chicken men. Please let me bring them out, that you may ravish them and do to them whatever you wish. But do not commit such an act of what? What do you guys have there? Vileness, right? Against this man. Well, is there one worse than another here? Whether it be homosexuality or same sex. It's both wrong. They right there should have, they should have fought against these guys or held them off. But the men would not listen to him. They kept wanting the relations with this Levite. They wouldn't listen. So the man seized his concubine and brought her out to them. And they raped her and abused her all night until morning. Then let her go at the approach of dawn. As the day began to dawn, the woman came and fell down at the doorway of the man's house, where her master was, until full daylight. So all night is ravaged. It was rape. It was really murder. They did everything. It's dark. This is Columbia. These are Israelites. These are Benjamites, Gibeonites. This is how far it had gone. This doesn't sound too far off the wall here in America at all, does it? So go back to Genesis 19:5. We know this follows this same story, doesn't it? This is Sodom. Everybody knows about Sodom and Gomorrah. Even people who have never heard of the Bible have heard of Sodom and Gomorrah.
They know if you say something on them, they know you're saying something against them.
Yep. They called Lot and said to him, "Where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us that we may have relations with them." They were the angels, right? But there we have it again. There's Lot, who is in Hebrews 11, the hall of faith. And he's offering who? His own daughters. At least it would seem more natural, but don't do it with these visitors that are coming here. What kind of reasoning is this? It's nothing in the Bible that you do with this. This is their own reasoning of trying to get out of it. Israel was bad as Sodom and Gomorrah. That's what we're saying. This is how bad it is. They had gotten to that point. Sodom and Gomorrah had been what? Pagans. They were absolutely against God's law. And so you got a wicked perversion here of the men of Gibeah. The Levite and the man, owner of the house, bring out to them these men. The daughter, the concubine of the Levite. And, it's like they clearly should have been willing to be able to sacrifice themselves before their daughters and concubines. The master of the house is willing to do this. He sacrificed his own daughter. The Levite cared nothing for his concubine. There he went out and got her back. And it's like now, he's willing to give her up. I have to wonder if these guys had been drinking a lot too at the same time. They've been celebrating. They're having a good old time.
I think they're just
And they just don't.
I think we know why the concubine left.
I-
Went back to her father's
I had
house.
that as a note. Why did she ever leave in the first place? Why did she even have relations with somebody else?
Right.
That was probably the reason. We get the character of this Levite right here. Matter of fact, as you go on further, you keep getting bigger pictures of this Levite.
Well, what's a Levite doing marrying a concubine?
Exactly. That right off the bat, right in that first verse, that's a sin right there. Yeah. Now, Levites can marry, but, you know, and in this sense, I don't know if it doesn't mention that he has any other wives, but they're taken to be less than a wife. Usually you have a concubine because you have a wife.
That has
It doesn't say anything about a wife.
she's of stature, the wife is.
Mhm.
She's the one that the family line needs to come through, but concubines are just
So what does that tell us? Where is she at as far as his status is concerned?
low on the totem pole.
Yeah.
She's a maid. She's pretty much a maid.
And here it is. So he gets her back and then gives her right up. Doesn't fight for her. They did have a little argument going for a little while, you know. But you can see that. That was a very good point there, Penny, that why she would leave the husband in the first place. Adam Clark, a commentator on Gibeah's sinful men or worthless fellows or what were some other ones? Anyway, he called them rascals and miscreants. Now that, I don't know, of the deepest dye. Worse than brutes, being a compound of beast and devil, inseparably blended. He calls them beast and devil.
Well, my notes say literal. The worthless fellows is literally sons of Belial.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sons
That's
of
right.
wicked.
That's right. Matter of fact, you might even see that in translations, but that's what that meant.
Yeah.
And Belial is related to Baal,
Yeah.
which is false god. We're talking Satan. This is, you know, to do these kind of things. Where do they get this? Well, Satan is the ruler of this world, isn't he? Centuries later, Israel still remembered this crime at Gibeah and used it as an example of what wickedness is. This is a horrible blight on Israel. This is one of their worst right here. Well, in 27 through 30, the Levite discovers that his concubine is actually dead. And it's almost like, you know, look at the way that he does it. He opened the doors, master opens the doors of the house, went on to go on his way. Then behold, his concubine was laying at the doorway of the house with her hands on the threshold. He said to her, "Get up, let us go." But there was no answer. What does that tell you? Then he placed her on the donkey, and the man arose and went to his home. When he entered his house, he took a knife, laid hold of his concubine, and cut her into 12 pieces, limb by limb. Remember this story? Sent her throughout the territory of Israel. All who saw it said nothing like this has ever happened or been seen from the day when the sons of Israel came up from the land of Egypt to this day. Consider it, take counsel, and speak up. So it upsets the rest of Israel. He does get the attention of the rest of the nation. And, limb by limb, he tore her up, cut her up, went throughout the territory. This is grotesque, a grotesque way to deliver a message. It did get across, and that made Israel very upset. Not at him. They're going to try to get the truth out of him, but now they're going to have to go address somebody in Benjamin at Gibeah. So here's where we come to chapter 20. This is where the civil war is going to start. All sons of Israel from Dan to Beersheba, including the land of Gilead, came out. The congregation assembled as one man to the Lord at Mizpah. The chiefs of all the people, even of all the tribes of Israel, took their stand in the assembly of the people of God. 400,000 foot soldiers who drew the sword. Keep that in mind. 400,000. That's a huge army. I think there probably is going to be a little pride here because of the number. It's going to present a problem. Now, the sons of Benjamin, there we go, heard that the sons of Israel had gone up to Mizpah. And the sons of Israel said, "Tell us, how did this wickedness take place?" So the Levite, the husband of the woman who was murdered, answered and said, I came with my own concubine to spend the night at Gibeah, which belongs to Benjamin. But the men at Gibeah rose up against me and surrounded the house at night because of me. They intended to kill me. Instead, they ravished my concubine so that she died. Do you see something missing here?
Yeah.
He's saying truth,
So,
but he's lying by not
yeah.
filling in the rest of the story. We gave her up. Yeah,
Well, not only that, but he didn't say they wanted to rape me.
Right.
They didn't mention
Well,
killing him. They just wanted
yeah.
to get away with him.
We don't see the killing there. I'm sure there might have been threats, but that's not what we see written. So, at any rate, he kind of makes it weigh on his side a little bit more. He probably didn't have to do that, but
The Benjamites are still guilty, no matter how you weigh it.
right.
But it's just like you didn't want to call them out on the depths of their sin.
I
You
mean,
just wanted to mention that they
they
did
say
something
that they
bad.
ravished his wife, his concubine.
Now, you know what? Children of Israel come out. This is a positive note here because they see something that has happened in their own camp or their own nation. They know that's wrong. At least they have a sensitivity to it that this is not right. You know, they could have gone all the way to the point of, so, big deal. That's, do whatever you want. It's okay.
Yeah, that would have been really bad.
When righteousness goes totally out, the wrath of God has been unleashed.
Yeah.
So they come out, positive sign, willing to deal with the problem. So we have to commend them there. We've been counting all these sins all the way through so far, right? There's a lot of degeneracy that has happened all throughout this time. But there is a religious conviction here. There is righteousness involved. And it seemed like the Gibeah crime just shocked them, shocked the whole conscience of Israel. They're all ready to, make justice happen here. So there's a crime. They recognize it. Of course, in our time, it would be kind of material for the tabloids or, TV and the talk shows and talk radio. But it's going to be a national call to repentance. That's what has happened here. So the Levite, in verses 3 through 7, he describes the abuse, the murder of the concubine, as they ask him. And so preparations for war are made. All the people arise. This is an encouraging response. A very dark time. They're ready to do justice. They're in unity here. I guess what they want to do is repay all the vileness that's been done here. This was extreme, what happens, but it's valid. And it deals with God's command to Israel. I've got a reference here in Deuteronomy 13. Verse 12.
I'm sorry, what?
Deuteronomy 13:12. If you hear in one of your cities, which the Lord your God is giving you to live in, anyone saying that some worthless men have gone out from among you and have seduced the inhabitants of their city, saying, let us go and serve other gods whom you have not known, then you shall investigate and search out, inquire thoroughly. If it's true and the matter established that the abomination has been done among you, you shall surely strike the inhabitants of that city with the edge of the sword, utterly destroying it and all that is in it, and its cattle with the edge of the sword. Then you shall gather all its booty into the middle of the open square and burn the city, and all its booty with fire as a whole burnt offering to the Lord your God. It shall be a ruin forever. It shall never be rebuilt. It's right out of the law. That's what they're playing out. That's what they're doing.
Well, it's funny they remember that one.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
They may be playing it out, but I really don't think that they're,
I mean, they were
doing it on purpose.
Is it really?
Are they really reading the word and really doing what God said?
Right there.
Yeah.
Might be something he
He knew.
remembered.
You know what I find interesting about this is that when people read this, like non-believers, they get so mad at God. And
Yes.
they see, so what kind of God would I serve? It's like, hello, if these people would have obeyed God's word, this would have never happened.
I thought God was love. I thought God was a God of love.
Take my shoe and smack that invisible person in the head.
And then as you do, he's also a God of wrath.
Yeah, that's right.
Sorry.
They said we could put the holy land on his hands.
Holy, just.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me
He is a
give you
holy God. Yes, he is.
Yeah, but people really, they read this and then they try to attack God for it. And it's
Yeah.
like if people would obey God's command, this would never happen.
Well, you know what? Doing right in your own eyes or obeying God's word. It's that simple. Here's what I think is best. This sounds better.
But my God.
He's not really like that. Well, there it is.
On the
Here's what he
phrase
does.
that I've heard, I can't believe in a God like that.
Right.
Yep, I can't believe in it. Well, then what are you believing? You're making up your own God. We don't make it up. We have it right here.
Even
We have
Christians use
the
that.
character of God.
That's not my
Oh,
God.
I've heard that all my life.
Yeah.
Well, that's not the God that I
That's not
have.
the God I love.
They obviously
Yeah.
don't read their Bible.
No.
The answer is backwards.
They listen to that guy and they don't read this part.
Right.
He doesn't hear for you either, so.
Wow.
So that they really need to justly, though, resolve this crisis that they have. They go to Benjamin, and Benjamin, the guys in it there, that they're, they know they're guilty. They committed a great sin. You have all of Israel coming now to them, and Benjamin becomes very loyal to each other, and they don't let them touch them. But your men, look what they did. And they're not going to hand them over.
They're not going to budge.
So what are you going to do? They have no other choice.
See, the thing that I noticed about Sodom and Gomorrah and the Benjamites, it says that in Sodom and Gomorrah, it says all the men of the city came together. And here it just said the perverted ones, the gross ones, came together to do their wicked deed.
Some worthless fellows.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's like, and now the whole city is like protecting those worthless men.
You know what? That sounds familiar
They're
today.
probably
But you're in
politicians.
the
The
government.
worthless fellows.
What are
Worthless fellows
what are
are
those
politicians.
worthless mayors and governors
Yes.
that won't let our power and policing that's out in the states that believe in that kind of
That's
thing,
exactly what I
where you have
said.
law and order,
If they were
which
righteous.
could have been taken care of and done quickly. But because of certain laws, that wasn't done. It could be, and it probably will be, done one of these days if nothing happens. But it's interesting, I guess you could say they put the interest of their own above the interest of what God's is, and it's what they reap.
Yeah, I don't think there was enough righteous people to go to somebody that night and get, somebody
Right.
to do the crap, that the ones, the worthless fellows. I think they were all pretty much worthless fellows, so it was like back to what's right in your own eyes.
Yeah.
So who do you, like what we're sitting there saying, they get in those cities, you ain't got anybody in there that you know for sure where they stand on anything.
Yeah, well, in our case, the president made a wise decision and said, hey, he calls them up, says, hey,
Waiting.
if you need help, we'll send them there right now. He went to all those cities,
Shut that stuff
and
down.
every one of them resisted. Democratic mayors, Democratic governors. All of these cities that are having all of this crazy stuff go on are all Democratic ruled cities, have been for decades. But yet, what is right that can be done, and they resist it, which means sooner or later there's going to have to be something done. And when it happens, it could cause a civil war. If you don't get it done now, though, their ranks will grow and grow, and it's going to be a lot harder. I would have been in favor of going in then when it was small. Why wait?
Right.
It's all part of
Just saying.
Satan's agenda. All a part of Satan's plan. You know, you get the rioters going, and then you unify the people who want to stand against the rioters. So now you have two militias, and neither side is right because neither side is. Both sides are not doing what's right in their own eyes. So then, military force has to get involved to take control of the situation, which will cause another militia. So then you have three people against each other.
I believe our president thought these people were that stupid and that wicked as they are to destroy everything that they.
He's seen it now. He knows full well. Yeah.
He can't move into the states and do he has to have.
He's trying to do what
they
the law.
have to request help from the federal.
And they haven't done that yet. Finally, it'll be at a point where you have to remove.
Well, and he was able to go in for a minute because it was a
At least protect the
property.
federal property, which was right to do.
That was all he could do.
About got castigated for that too.
Yeah, well, because it's not in his job description. He can't do that.
Right. But it will have to be done eventually.
Well, and that'll be called martial law.
Yeah. Which you don't want to go there. You have to wait.
Martial law.
There is elections involved too.
Martial law, and the federal government takes over.
Yeah, when you overthrow the local government, you have martial
That's a last ditch effort.
That's what he's trying to avoid.
And I think that's what people are pushing towards. I think those people in charge are
And then they're
pushing
hoping
for
that
that.
they take over the federal.
Yeah.
They hope to replace him. And
No,
then
they would like for that to happen, and then he would not be reelected because people would be outraged.
People would.
Because martial law involves a whole lot more than just taking care of the rioters.
Because then he would have to tell people
It
to hand
shuts
over
down
their
everything.
firearms. And there's just a lot of things that would take place.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of wisdom involved there, but at the same time,
I think he handled it
democratic
just right.
cities are burning. You hate to see that, but here we
Well,
are.
maybe those citizens will wake up and not elect Democrats.
Well, you'd like to think that. How much of a depraved mind can reason though? I don't know. And a lot of them are moving into our area. How are they going to vote next time? In our area.
Are they stupid? They'll do the same thing again.
I don't know. Some of them are changing though.
Some of them just want
Some are changing.
They want
Some love
fire.
chaos.
They
You
want
better believe it.
reasons to pop off all those guns and fire bullets, and they have missile rocket
They
launchers.
should go to Iran.
They should.
So they actively resist the other tribes with an assembled army. The Benjamites do, Gibeonites. So here's your battle in 18 through 21. You have the first day of battle. The Israelites have how many? 400,000. They well outnumber the Benjamites, which in verse 15, they numbered 26,000 men who draw the sword, and then they had 700 choice men, great warriors. They were left-handed Benjamites, and they could sling a stone at a hair and not miss. They're like the Clampets. Whenever you could put an ant up on the top of the concrete wall over there, and they take their gun, blow that ant off there, right?
You lost a bell.
Beverly Hillbillies.
You can watch it on TV now. It's on one of those shows early in the morning. It's okay, Bill.
Yeah.
You'll be all right.
Are you left-handed by the chance?
No. Actually, I'm not.
These guys were good. And so you got 26,000 taken on 400,000. This should be done in a few moments, guys. We're going to go in and take care of this. No, it didn't happen. They went up to the house of God in 18 through 21 to inquire of God. Well, that's good, isn't it? They sought the Lord. But they were defeated. The first day they were actually defeated. I mean, the war's not over, but that battle they lost. They still trusted in the might of their army, though, I think. They got the 400,000. We're going to win this thing. It's no problem. But maybe they're not really trusting in the Lord, even though they seek Him out. That's good. That's a good sign. So the children of Benjamin came out of Gibeon. On that day, they cut down to the ground 22,000 men in that one day. Well, they only have 26,000 or so, right?
Yeah.
Versus and they got 22,000 out. staggering, severe loss to lose that many. And this is a small civil war that's going on here, and it's involving thousands. And so Israel, perhaps there was something wrong in the way that Israel sought the Lord before this battle, or maybe it's part of God's plan to discipline and correct his disobedient nation.
As a whole.
Exactly. He corrects a disobedient nation through a tragic loss of 22,000 soldiers of Israel. Well, in verse 23, Israel seeks God after the first defeat. They don't give up. It's a wonderful reaction, I believe, really, in the midst of that's a dark event. They didn't expect to get beaten. So they see, I guess when you see these soldiers here, they don't lose hope. They strengthen themselves in the Lord. They move forward. They wept before the Lord until evening. So to their credit, the children of Israel didn't stop seeking the Lord after the first disaster in battle. They humbled themselves before God, sought him regarding the next battle. They're doing what God really is honored by, in the sense. But guess what? In verse 24 and 25, you have the second day of battle. Israel is defeated before Benjamin again. There was a great cost for them to pay in doing what was right. 2 days in a row. So in 26 through 28, Israel repents before God. 2 defeats. They needed to be humbled. They are very much humbled. 2 days of defeat. God used this to humble the whole nation. What they have to understand is the horror of the crime of Gibeah was not merely the result of one group of men, of worthless fellows, of evil, wicked men, or even one city, or even one tribe. Are we getting it now? The whole nation is guilty, and they all need to be humbled. Because they first thought that the sin problem was only in Benjamin. And if they would have won right out, they would have taken all credit for it.
Right.
God gives them 2 defeats. And they sought after him. Yeah, this is what they deserve. It's sad.
Well,
because they're doing what's
the
right.
The first day they didn't even talk to him, right? They just went and then they lost a bunch of people. So then they went to the Lord.
Well, in 18 to 21, read that for a moment. Let's see. Let's check this out.
Oh, okay. They
Yeah,
did. Okay. Okay.
Did we see that? They went to
they-
Bethel.
Yeah.
But the
Inquire to
difference
God.
is both times they went up and asked, but the third time they fasted, they
Right.
repented, they offered the correct offerings.
Right.
They were helpless.
But the whole problem is that God's going to give them victory. The only thing is, it's not easy. And it's a lesson for the whole nation, because it's not just that group of men. It's not just that city or that tribe. It's a whole nation. That's the story of the whole nation.
And not only that, but like, can you imagine that when you find out what the Benjamites did, and you're like, that's it, we're gonna go up and we're gonna teach them a lesson. And you go out there and you lose, and you're like, what the heck? How did we lose? And you get mad because you're like, we lost, and after what they've done. And so then you console God and you go out again, you lose again.
And he
It's
tells them to go. God
Yeah,
tells
and
them.
Yep.
Can you imagine, like, it's like, because a lot of people here like sports, I like playing sports, but yesterday we played soccer, okay, and my team won 5-0. We got 5 goals, they had 0, and the other team next round, they came with fury, and they got 4, we got 1. They got 5, we got 1. So it was almost, but they lost, so they had this fury, this rage to, like, desire to like get back, so that they weren't so low on points. And then they won that game, and then they won a second game, and then we won our second game, and it was just like this whole back and forth, that competition, people don't want to lose. And when you do lose, and you go back at it, you go twice as hard. And when I see this with the Israelites, it's like they went out, they lost, their people died. And I can see them being mad, and I can see them just wanting to be like, let's send out the whole army against them and just run them over, wipe them out, and just, yeah.
God says no.
But they don't. They actually humble themselves. They actually humble themselves, and they're.
That's the point, isn't it?
You have all your self-resources. Guess what you have to do? You have to look on the outside of yourself and find out another way, another way to think about it.
Can I throw something in that's not really.
Throw it, Audrey.
Oh, I'm gonna throw it out here.
Talking sports.
But back up on verse 18, the very last part says, and the Lord said, Judah shall go up first. Judah is the tribe of the Lord. Also, when the Israelites were leaving Egypt, Judah was the tribe in front. I just find those little things like that I find fascinating. So I'm thinking if Judah went up first, Judah suffered those losses the most.
Right.
Point. They'd be the first, wouldn't they?
Because it does seem like when the Babylonians came and took over, it was Judah that they attacked, right? And he was supposed to be the one that got the double blessing from his father, right?
But there was big judgment there. Huge.
It came at a great price.
And they, of all people, should have been the biggest witnesses. And they are the forerunners of the Messiah who's going to come through that. They should be leading, shouldn't they?
Right. And don't you know Satan would want them wiped out?
Right.
Boy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One more thing before we move on. The blessing that Jacob gives to his children at the end of his life. He says, Benjamin is a ravenous bull. In the morning he shall devour the prey, and at night he shall divide the spoils.
Yeah.
And this guy has 2,600 men, 26,000 men, 700 left-hand swordsmen, and they can hit a hare with a rock from a really far distance.
Do they know how to fight?
That sounds pretty ravenous to me.
They are warriors. They are warriors. And they knew how to take those guys on. But third day came, victory for Israel over Benjamin and Gibeah. God didn't want the 2 days of humbling them make Israel think that they could never win. But I'm sure they were getting to a point of wondering. They were encouraged to go out that next day and trust God's promise. They won. Part 3. So we've seen the Civil War now, haven't we? We've seen all these other things that go on. And it started with what? The Levite and his concubine. But really it exposed how bad in Israel it really was. Not only in Gibeah, but everywhere. So here these Israelites, they just keep doing foolish things. And then, it's like, do 2 wrongs make a right? Well, that's what they do. That old adage, 2 wrongs never make it right, do they? So, at Mitzpah, there's a curse that's laid on anyone who gives the daughter as wives for the tribe of Benjamin. Why do they come up with this curse? They don't have to do this. It's a foolish oath, is what it is.
There's not much left of Benjamites anyway.
That's right.
Well, they don't want to see them.
Wasn't that curse enough? They got their butts beat.
Well,
Really
I'm sure
bad.
to them now they're thinking, this is probably the right thing to do. But this foolish oath had consequences. Justice not only brings punishment to evildoers, but it also guards against punishment that's too harsh. And that's what they did. Israel realizes in verse 2 and 3 that the whole tribe is now in danger of extinction. Oh my. What have we done?
See, that's what I'm talking about. They finally won their battle, and they overkill.
And they kill all the women. How can Benjamin now multiply again? There's like 400 men left. One tribe would be missing in a short amount of time, and it would all be over. So they're down to about 400 men, and those men are unable to marry because of the curse pronounced in Judges 21 one, the tribe of Benjamin is almost extinct. So there's solutions to the problem of the foolish oath. And as we keep developing this story, it gets quite interesting. In 4 through 15, you get the destroying of the city of Jabesh Gilead and taking their young women.
Well, I can see why they didn't want to give their women to the Benjamites. After what they did to the concubine, I wouldn't want them to have any of my daughters either.
Yeah. Just makes sense, doesn't it?
Just heterosexual.
Yeah, to me it's like, you know what? Perish.
But they know that they have to be 12 tribes.
Yeah.
Uh-oh. So, they destroy a city.
Why do they have to be 12 tribes?
12 tribes of
I
Israel.
mean, they just always have been, but why would they have to continue to?
God set it up that way.
They know full well that that's what makes up Israel.
There's 12 gates.
Have to
in the
have
kingdom of heaven.
that. Yeah.
God's into that number thing.
Yeah.
And God is going to make sure that there's always going to be 12. Because in Revelation, you'll see that there are 12 tribes of Israel. And 12,000 in each one, which is 144,000. And they're going to be coming from each one of those tribes. So God, no matter what they're thinking and they're doing, He's going to make sure that they all survive.
God did save 400 of the remnant
Yeah.
of the tribe of Benjamin. Because even when
Still living.
Judah was taken into captivity, there was like 1,000 or so left in Benjamin or in Judah, but they were like the poor and the lame and
Yeah.
the weak of the people that cast out.
Okay, I got 600. In verse 47 it says, but 600 men turned and fled toward the wilderness.
No,
Yeah, they got,
verse 20, chapter 20.
yeah, verse 47. 600 men turned and fled toward the wilderness to the rock of Rimmon. They remained at the rock of Rimmon for 4 months.
What I could never really understand was the half tribes of Manasseh and
Ephraim.
Ephraim and Manasseh, they had
They're divided up. They're dealing with Joseph, right? That's
Yeah.
what the deal was. Yeah.
Wasn't that the
So they
daughters?
got a lesson.
Wasn't that his daughters that? They were girls. Oh, I don't know.
I just never understood. If you have 12 tribes, now all of a sudden you kind of have 13.
But they're kind of still formed to be one. And a lot of times you'll see different ones that line up as that. As you go through, even in Revelation, you have a different kind of a numbering. But it's always 12. Is what it really equals out to. It depends on how you do that dividing up.
I find it interesting the strategy that the Israelites used to defeat the Benjamins is like the same strategy they used after they crossed Jordan to Ai. They went in, and the Ais chased them, and then they fled, and then ambushed them. And it almost reads like that same process. And it's almost like, how did you guys fall for that? Not that I'm supporting them, but it's just
Don't you know
like...
this trick? This is an old trick. This is the old
Yeah,
trick.
I'm gonna write that
Pull
one
the back.
down.
Yeah.
Pull it out the back.
Well, they did what was right at the time that they thought, but actually it was a horror. They decided to slaughter a whole city of Israel, a city that refused to join with Israel in fighting against Benjamin. So they say, we'll get the women from there. So they go up there. They do that. It's like doing one bad thing to make up for another. They just kicking themselves, shooting themselves in the foot. They had a foolish oath made at Mitzpah. They should have agreed to give their daughters as wives to the men of the tribe of Benjamin. And that would have renounced the whole foolish vow. But there's an ungodly massacre here at Jabesh Gilead. They kill all but 400 young virgins. And that wasn't enough. There were 600 men, like you said. There's 400 women. And so there's a scheme to give the remaining men of Benjamin an opportunity to take wives. So they answered the problem of wives for the remaining Benjamites by creating a little drama. The Benjamites were allowed to kidnap women, where they were all going to gather together. Yeah, I know. The marriages could be arranged without an official approval. So these men are going to, it was it was like a feast, and it could very well have been I'm not so sure which feast. Some commentator said it might have been the feast of, what is it? There's the Feast of Trumpets. There's the.
Oh, I actually have a list right here on this same page in my Bible. Well, I don't know what.
I'm trying to think which
Well,
one it
there's
was.
Passover, Pentecost, Trumpets, Day of Atonement, Tabernacles.
Tabernacles would have been something like what, and they're out there, celebrating, and it's all just women, and they're all together out there, and of course then they're able to kind of kidnap them, take them, and now the men have the women enough to each one have a wife. As far as the oath is concerned, they should have confessed their sin of making the oath, not even done that, done the right thing. And what happens, though, they went and returned to their inheritance. They rebuilt the cities, dwelt in them, and this is the tribe of Benjamin, and it was sufficiently restored to provide Israel with its first king coming up. That's Saul.
Right. And we know how that turned out.
We know how that turned out.
It's a little inherited thing that keeps happening.
Yeah.
Okay, we're up to the very last verse in our study of Judges, and it's that one that everybody's familiar with, and we've seen it before. In those days, there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes. That is what everybody does. It is good to have leaders. Still, yet, when morals don't mean anything to people, they do whatever they think is right. Well, this is what I think about God, as we were talking about earlier. Or this is what I think, regardless of what the law says.
Well, as Christians, we do what we see as right in our own eyes.
And we get in trouble when we do that, don't we?
We get real stupid when we do that, don't we?
They rejected the standard of God's word. They accepted their own individual standards of what was right in their own eyes. It's impossible to read this appendix verse here to the book of Judges, and especially this very closing part, without being impressed, I guess you could say, with how sad this condition is in this country that's supposed to be God's people. And they didn't have any principles. But at least they did some things right here, because there was still a little bit of a remnant left, and they did stand for some righteousness. So passion can move to purpose only as it's really governed by principle. The principles really are the Word of God rather than our own eyes. Well, that's Judges. Can you see kind of why I put it all together? I'm sorry about doing that. But we still got to be able to kind of share in this together as we went through it. We didn't really read a lot of the verses. If we would have, we wouldn't have had time. Now, if you want to get back and get some more detail, but I got a feeling a lot of you, as we were going through it, we're still looking at some of these verses, weren't you? But if you want to, you can go back and read over it again. I want to make it sense. But it's broken down in that outline. Did that outline help? Because that's pretty well summing up what each section of those verses are. So, but that gets us an idea of where we are at. This is the kind of people we live amongst. This is why I would ask, can God bless America? Everybody says, God bless America. Can he?
Right.
Well, he can.
Right.
But really, should he? Well,
If
one of these days he won't.
You need a rebuke, then yes.
Yeah.
I'm thinking I'm gonna have to I'm gonna have to go to all these, I usually go to Gerb's if I go to a grocery store. Well, I heard on the radio tonight that there were 2 ladies in Arkansas who were fired from Kroger's.
Yep.
Because Kroger's requiring a rainbow on.
And a smiley face.
And a smiley face on the apron, and they looked it up, and it does have to do with LGBT.
Oh,
whatever.
sure.
Oh,
Yeah.
no
Sure.
kidding.
And they didn't want to,
They said they wear another apron if they wouldn't wear that.
so they fired them.
Although I did get all excited today when I was in the pool, I saw rainbows in the pool.
That's
You
right.
see, they
Did
just
not-
ruined the rainbow.
Did not
Yeah, they
represent.
Yeah.
Did not represent.
Their
So
rainbow,
maybe it was
my
versus-
rainbow's a different
versus